My name is Matthew. I am the owner and mechanic and the main person who does most of the things at Upcycles PDX. We're a tiny bike shop in Portland, Oregon. Upcycles works pretty closely with Rad Power bikes. It is not all we do, and I really want to push back against perceptions that it's all we do. I do regular bikes. I'd much rather do regular bikes. I charge less money for regular bikes, so bring them by. But it is what it is. We're big on Rad. I work on a lot of Rad Power bikes. A really common issue is a lot of the bikes have mechanical disc brakes. There's a learning curve to getting them adjusted correctly. And a lot of people try to do it themselves, either to save some money or just they don't want to do any research. They don't want to find a bike shop. They don't want to come to a bike shop. Because, I mean, we've all got stuff to do that's better than coming to see me. Except for me, I'm stuck in this. I've seen the same mistakes made like over and over and over again, given the same demonstration, the same explanations over and over and over again. So my hope is doing this will just get the information out there, save people some time, and yeah, that's it. So I've got a couple props here. This is a brake lever. It's an e-bike brake lever. It has the cutoff for a motor brake. It is Tektro brand. I don't know. Ooh, that's going to be, it's mirrored on my screen. I don't know if you can read that or not. It's got a lever that you pull. That pulls the cable. The head of the cable sits in the lever like so. And so when you pull the lever, you're pulling the cable. That cable runs through a piece of housing. It's much bigger than this. This is a little one that I use to pre-stretch cables. Which is a whole thing I'm not going to explain right now. But it sits in your brake lever like this, and then the cable runs through there. I don't know if you're going to be able to really, you're not going to be able to see through that, but you can see that there's a hole in the end there. And we can model that the cable passes through the housing. And then that all is going to go to your brake caliper, which is the item I used as I had a brand new one still in the package. I used an image of this as the thumbnail for the video. If you have a Rad Runner 2, a Rad Expand 5, a Rad Runner Plus, a Rad Runner 1, which is like a discontinued model, a lot of the older bikes like the Rad City 3, some others I'm not quite sure off the top of my head. A lot of the Rad Power bikes, this is the brake that's on them. The Radwagon 4 has a similar but different brake on it, but there's a lot of legacy bikes out there, and they are still selling new bikes that have these brakes on them. So lever, caliper. You could also call this the brake. This is the brake lever. Housing, cable. Okay, so the lever, you actuate the lever, you pull the cable through the housing. When you do that, there's a similar lever here, and I don't know. I call this like the brake arm. I don't really know what Tektro calls it. But that, you can see that moves. Your housing runs into here, right? Your cable comes through here. This isn't really right, but it comes like that. If you can see here, that is what's called the pinch bolt. I'm going to get this to, okay, this rules. So you can see there's sort of this guide here. So your cable comes out of there, it runs into there, and then you pinch it. It's going to be hard to see on the screen, but you pinch it, this little like square nut, and then the rest of the arm. And you tighten that bolt down, and it holds the cable in place. So that's essentially how it works, right? It's more complicated than that. I don't have a rotor here to show you, but if you have a bike, and I'm assuming people who have bikes or who's watching this, it's pretty obvious what the rotor is. It's called a disc brake. The part that looks like a disc, that's the rotor. Kind of looks like a CD, you know, if you're old enough to remember those. And then I don't know how easily you can see in here, but those are the pads. Let me. Ooh. Okay, so those are the pads in there, and then you can kind of see some light coming through there. That space where the light is, that's the empty space between the pads. That's where the rotor is. So the rotor is going to rotate in there. Pads come together. Not exactly. The pads come together. Grab the rotor. There's friction between the rotor and the pads. That slows the bike down. That's how you stop. 5mm Allen key. Loosen the bolt, and then now you can see kind of that empty space there between the bolt. And so as you tighten the bolt down, you put the cable in there and then tighten the bolt down. I think you could see there, it was kind of fast, but the nut gets closer, tightens it down. That's how it holds together. Okay, so when you pull the cable, it's going to pull this arm. And then I don't know how easy it's going to be to show you this on here. Yeah, you can totally tell. So I'm pulling we're imagining we're pulling a cable. This is upside down, but you can see the pad moves. You may notice only one pad moves. Okay, so that'll be important later on. So you pull the lever. It pulls the cable. The one pad moves in, pushes the rotor into the other pad, which does not move. Friction between the pads and the rotor slows your bike down. What I want to point out here is you can have different amounts of space there between the pads and the rotor. So one way to show that is this nut here moves, or this, I guess it's a bolt. This adjusting piece of hardware here adjusts the position of the, let's get you back on screen. Adjust the position of the pad that doesn't move. And so I can turn it way in and you can actually see the silver moving in, and it might be hard to tell. I'm going to need like floodlights or something to do this, but you can see the silver moving in. So that's just pushing that pad into a position that it's just going to stay in. But the space between the pads gets smaller. We can back it up. And now the space between the pads is bigger. If there's more space to get the pads to come against the rotor, you have to pull more of the lever. So, right, if there's a very small amount of space, looking at our lever again, let's get this out of the way. All right, looking at our lever again, let's say there's a very small amount of space, you might be able to pull the lever just like that much and slow your bike down, right? If there's a lot of space, you're gonna pull the lever a lot more to slow the bike down. Right, and that's the problem, right? You get to a point riding the bike where you're pulling the lever all the way to the handlebar, and it's still not slowing the bike down enough, and you need to adjust your brake. And so, what do you need to do? You need to take up that empty space between the pads and the rotor. And what do most people do who haven't done this before and are just kind of looking at it and trying to solve the problem? They take their tool. They undo the pinch bolt. They actuate this arm in. So let's try to show you this way from this view. So they'll bring the arm in, they'll loosen the bolt, bring the arm in, so like shortening the cable, then tighten it back down. In the short term, does that work? Kind of. It's not completely ineffectual. It's not right. It's not right for a couple reasons. One of the reasons it's not right is you're going to damage the cable every time you pinch it and unpinch it. You might ruin the cable in one go, you know, especially if you've never done it before, you're learning as you're going, you might ruin your cable in the space of a few minutes. But you're going to damage the cable. Let's say you do it once, you pinch it down once. Yeah, your cable, it's fine. It's still not right for a couple of reasons. One is, okay, so down the road, we go to replace the brake pads. This is going to be too far in now, so we have to let it out. If you're letting it out on that same cable, now the part of the cable that you pinched previously is like inside this space, and it's damaged, and it's just damaged. If you pinch it, unpinch it, repinch it, it's damaged. Pinch it once, let it be, you're good to go. Pinch it lightly to check your adjustment, and then maybe undo it and redo it, probably fine. But if you're pinching it down like torque to spec, which on these cables is like 6 Newton meters, when you loosen that back up, it's damaged. If you look at it, you can tell. It's fine as long as it's held there in that spot, but once it's out of there, look at it, it's clearly damaged. You don't want to damage the cable. Why don't you want to damage the cable? Well, let's say we pulled it too tight, then later we let it back out. We've got damaged cable in this space. It can break. I've seen it. If your cable breaks, how does your brake work? That was terrible. Anyway, it doesn't work. You need the cable intact for it to work. So you're potentially creating a really unsafe situation. It's also just like, you got to replace the cable. Cables aren't expensive. I charge $6 for them. You can buy them in bulk and get them for like not very much at all. But it'd be better to not damage it. It'd be better to keep it going. Additionally, this only moves one pad. Okay, so you haven't moved your other pad in. That requires you to adjust on the other side. Depending on your bike, that can be really hard to do. But Rad has a tool they make for it on some of the older motors on the back. You can't really reach it without their tool. I could grab it to show you, but we're just going to move on. And then I haven't seen this much, but I have seen people do it where they they pulled the cable tighter by moving this arm further up on the cable, and it seemed to work, but only for a little bit, and then it feels loose again, so they do it again, and they keep doing it, and then eventually you can get to a point, I don't know if you're going to be able to see there, but it's actually hitting, that little guide is hitting the caliper. So if the little guide is hitting the caliper, it's not going to have much movement to bring the pad in. And so the effect of that, you're pulling the lever all day. You might even hear it hit and be like, well, what's that sound? And it's not going to slow the bike down. So we don't want to do that. So that's like my number one thing is do not just unpinch and repinch the cable. Assuming your brake was set up correctly in the first place, you don't really need, you do need a tool for one thing, but you don't need to touch that pinch bolt at all. If it was set up correctly previously, and we're going to assume that it was because you've been riding the bike, right? There's no reason to touch that cable or that pinch bolt. There's no reason to adjust that cable. Leave it right where it is. What you need to do is just bring the brake pads in. There's 3 parts of this system you can adjust to bring the brake pads in, and you'll be safer. It'll work better. It's not that hard. Now, all of this is assuming it was set up correctly in the first place, which I haven't seen your bike. I don't know, but let's assume it was. And then it's assuming that your rotor is relatively true. True just meaning like round is one way to think of it. Straight is another way to think of it. Like if you look at a fixed point, okay, and your rotor is like rotating around relative to that fixed point, if the rotor is true, it's going to maintain the same distance every time it comes around to there. If as it's rotating, you're seeing it do this, that's a rotor that's not true. And truing a rotor, honestly, if you're like not very mechanically inclined, if you don't have bicycle tools, just bring it to a shop. I might do a video on it someday if I continue to do videos, but it's not a very quick or easy thing to do correctly. I'm pretty good at it at this point because I've been doing it for years. It still sometimes can take me like, I don't know, 30 minutes to get one good, and that's as an experienced person. And occasionally I have somewhere I'm like, I've just lost an hour of my life to this thing. It's not getting better. I just have to replace the rotor. So, I don't know if your rotor, if you're working on your bike at home, I don't know if your rotor is good. Okay. So assuming our rotor is true, and then the other assumption I'm making right now is that you have enough brake pad left that this is a practical thing to do. If your brake pads are totally shot, you shouldn't just be adjusting it tighter. It's time to get new brake pads. That's a whole different conversation as well. But we're assuming, let's say you bought the bike brand new, the brake was working great when you had it. You've put, I don't know, 300 miles on it or something, and the brake's not feeling very good. Okay, now we're going to look at our lever. We're going to look at our caliper. We are not going to unpinch and repinch the cable. Okay, what we're going to do instead, we have a mechanism here on the brake lever. This is called a barrel adjuster, and it's really very simple. You turn it counterclockwise, you turn it out. You can see how it's getting longer. Okay, so what does that do? So our cable is a fixed length of cable. We have the head of the cable here that is in the brake lever. There's no movement there. I could yank on this all day. It's not going anywhere. I could bend it a bunch and fatigue it and break it, but we're not going to do that. Pull on it all day. It's very, very strong. It's not going to go anywhere. Your cable on the other end is pinched at the pinch bolt. And again, one pinch, torque it to 6 Newton meters. It's holding. You can pull on this all day. It's not going to get any longer. It's not going to change. You have a fixed length of cable from the head to where it's pinched in the pinch bolt. Okay, so let's say, I don't know, you have that, right? And then you have this much housing. When you turn the barrel adjuster out, you're effectively increasing the length of the housing. And so when I used to teach this to kids, this is kind of a weird way to explain this, but it's the thing that I can think of. A thing that was popular in like Looney Tunes or whatever when I was a kid was like medieval torture devices. And there's one called the rack, right? Where they would fix your arms and fix your legs, and then they turn a crank and it stretches the table out. And then what does that do? That pulls you apart. So the housing plus the barrel adjuster, that's the rack. And the cable, that's the human body that's going to be pulled tighter. So it's kind of a gruesome analogy. I should come up with a better one. I don't have a better one. That's the one I use. But so basically, you turn this out. It is a hollow bolt that your cable passes through. And we can take this all the way off of this. And I can show you, you can see the skin of my nose through the hole there. So that's where your cable goes through. And so, you know, assuming that you haven't changed your pinch bolt, okay, right there where it's all the way in, that's going to be the loosest your cable can be at your current setup. And then as you turn this out, that's going to make your cable tighter. Okay, you also have one on your caliper. So it's here. And whoops, so I'm like looking at the screen instead of looking at the thing in front of me. And same deal with this. As we turn it out, you can see it gets longer, right? Because you're just turning a screw out. And can I get this set up so you can see clear through it? Again, you can see clear through it. The cable's running through there. So you turn those out, the cable gets tighter. Is that going to move both brake pads in? No, it's only going to move on this brake. There's different brakes where this is different reality. And this brake, which is the common one on Rad Power bikes, it's only going to move that pad. And you can see that it only moves one pad. So you screw those out. That makes it tighter. How tight should it be? You should be able to spin the wheel and listen and not hear the rotor when you haven't pushed on the lever, not hear the rotor hit the brake pad. If you hear the rotor hitting the brake pad, it's too tight, and take your barrel adjuster, whichever one you've adjusted, and turn it back in. Another question, this barrel adjuster versus this barrel adjuster, which one should I use? It doesn't really matter. But, people can disagree with me. There's like maybe different thread pitches. So like a full rotation of this one might be different from a full rotation of the other one in terms of the amount of cable it takes up or cable slack that it takes up. I'm not going to get that granular with it. Generally, this one you can do while you're riding the bike. So like if I'm out on a ride and I do a hard stop and I'm like, ugh, that brake didn't feel that good. I might, while I'm riding, just use this one to make it tighter. And then later I finish my ride, I'm at the bike shop or at home or whatever. What I might do then is turn this one back in all the way. And then let's say this one had never been adjusted and I only used the other one on my ride because that one I could do while riding. I didn't have to stop and fool with it. I could just do it as I was moving. Now I'll turn the other one now I'm back at home. I turn the other one back in and then I'll use this one for my adjustment, right? And then get it back to that place where it feels more or less the same as it did. And now on my next ride, I still have all of my barrel adjuster on my brake lever available to me if I want to do further fiddling with it. But don't overthink it. You just want to turn those out. And then there's another part on these, and I think you can see there. This is a lock ring or a lock nut. And so initially you have that against the end of the bolt and turned all the way in like that. Okay, but let's say I've used this to tighten. Now I'm going to back that out. And now this is very loose, right? I'm turning that very easily with my hand. I want it to stay where I put it. So then I'll turn the lock nut against the caliper, and then I'll actually like put a little bit of force into it. I want it nice and snug. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm like pushing with a bit of strength there. And now this won't move. Well, it kind of did because I didn't get it quite as tight as I should have. But that will keep it so this, like the vibration of the road or whatever is not, let's get my handsome face on there. The vibration of the road is not going to cause that to move. And then same deal with this one. So it's all the way in. We back it up. What does that do? That tightens our cable. Okay, so now our cable's tighter. And then again, we want to bring the lock ring back against the body of the brake lever, get it nice and snug, and then that stays in place. So again, like the vibration of the road isn't going to change where we put that. Okay, so that's our barrel adjusters. One on the lever, one on the caliper, and then that only moves that one pad, the pad that moves. The other pad we can also adjust, and it's in a way a simpler thing, but in a way like a less precise thing. And it's, you put a 5mm Allen key in here, and I think you can probably hear those clicks. And we looked at this before. As it turns in, you can see that pad moves. So that doesn't move when you ride. It doesn't move when you use the brake lever. It only moves when you turn that in. You're definitely not going to do that while you're riding because like the wheel's in your way. But so you're adjusting your brake. You've got your barrel adjuster as tight in as you can get it. You've locked the lock rings back against the body of the caliper or brake lever, whichever you're using. And now you're going to turn this one in one click, just like that. Spin your wheel. Listen, is the rotor hitting the brake pad? If yes, back it back off one click. And I'm sorry, you're just not ready for that click. Give it a spin. It's not rubbing. You're good to go. Let's say you turn it in one click, you spin it, it's not rubbing. Turn it in another click, you spin it, it's not rubbing. Whoa, that would be weird. Normally one is like what you get out of it. But okay, turn it in again, spin it, it's rubbing. Back it back off, spin it, it's not rubbing. You've now adjusted your brake. But that's it. That's all you should do. So the barrel adjusters, you don't even need a tool. The pinch bolt, my advice is don't even touch it until you're like ready to replace a cable. There's no reason to touch that. And again, assuming it was set up correctly, which I don't know. You know, if you bought a used, as an aside, don't buy a used bike. Used bikes, buy used bikes all day long. Used bikes are such a good investment. Do not buy a used e-bike, please. And especially don't buy a used direct-to-consumer e-bike. What is a direct-to-consumer e-bike? A direct-to-consumer e-bike is like a Rad Power bike, an Aventon, a Blix, electric, any of those that like you go on a website, You give them $2,000 or whatever, and a bike shows up at your house. That's direct to consumer. They didn't go through a dealer. A dealer would be like a bike shop, right? The traditional bike industry model is on the dealership model, similar to how like cars and I assume like boats and stuff are sold, where the dealer buys a bunch of bikes, gets them ready, customer comes in, test rides some bikes, takes one home. These businesses aren't on that model. That's not what Rad Power does. That's not what Electric does. That's Aventon, Blix. Those are the big ones. I think there are others out there, but those are the ones I see a lot. These brands exist at kind of a place in the market where they're not the best thing. They're not the worst thing. The worst thing are like the bikes that they sell like Walmart, Bimart, something like that. Nobody should buy those for any reason. They're worth less than their weight in scrap. They're really, really low quality. Amazon, don't buy an e-bike on Amazon, please, for the love of God. Assuming it was set up correctly, the cable is pinched at the right spot, the rotor is true, you have enough brake pad left to keep riding. How long do brake pads last? I don't really know. It depends on a lot of things. On an e-bike in general is going to go through them faster than a traditional bike because they're heavier and they go faster. And so that's more inertia that the brake has to stop. Can it do it? Yes. How does it do it? It just wears faster. So that's kind of the trade-off there. So assuming it was all set up correctly and assuming you have enough brake pad to go, you should probably be able to adjust your brakes, assuming they were set up right the first time. 2 times, I think, is reasonable to get them back to like pretty tight before your pads are actually worn out. And that's assuming you let it go till like it's almost hitting the handlebar. If you're doing minor adjustments all along the way to keep it like as tight as you can, which is what I do, but I'm the bike nerd. I'm constantly fiddling with the thing. If you're doing it that way, then I don't know how many times you're going to do it, like 50, but if you're letting it go till like it's almost hitting the lever, which is not totally safe, but it's also what a lot of people do, then do like one big adjustment where, again, you're just turning the barrel adjuster and turning that fixed pad, and that's it. 2 or 3 times, three times might be pushing it. Maybe do it the 3rd time and get it to the bike shop and ask them if you need new pads. When do you need new pads? When they're really thin. There is a tool out there I've seen where you can like take the pad off the bike and like put it in to measure it. But until you've done that, you've done like half the labor of installing the new pads. So I don't know why you. So I think I've pretty much explained it. To review, do not unpinch and pull the cable tighter and repinch the cable. It is the wrong way to adjust it. You're setting yourself up for a less safe system, and you're setting yourself up to spend a little bit more money down the road. All you want to do is adjust those barrel adjusters. The one on the lever is the one I like to do while I'm riding because I have access to it while I'm riding. The one on the caliper I'll do when I get back home, and usually I'll turn the one on the lever back in to pull this one out. With either of them, when you've pulled it out, you want to bring the lock nut back against the caliper body to hold it in place. And then you want to adjust your fixed pad on the other side. And often like one click is about what you get out of it. And then it should feel better. You should be good to go. If not, contact Upcycles. I can probably help you. All right. This is Pizza Party. He is the only other full-time employee of Upcycles PDX. He is 4 years old. He's the best dog in the world, though he is, he advocates for himself consistently, almost constantly throughout the day. He did finally leave me alone and go to sleep there after I put him on timeout. But now I just woke him back up, and he's licking my hand to give me a little bit of love. And he's great. And if you're in Portland, come by Upcycles, come pet my dog, come buy some brake pads. Thanks. Take care.